Strange Darling is the best movie that I have seen this year so far. And I've seen some pretty damn good movies this year, as well as some pretty bad ones. It's the kind of movie that you watch, and as the end credits are rolling, you're already trying to decide how soon you can make it back to the theater for a rewatch. I mean, shit, when I watched it the other night, I was half tempted to buy a ticket right then and there for the very next showing. It's a type of movie that reminds you of what this medium can actually be when it's at its most unique and inventive. When it comes to modern day filmmaking, I say what I'm about to say a lot. There are so many different movies out there, so many different stories that have been told in the landscape of film that it's damn near impossible to make a movie these days that tells a wholly unique story that's never been done before. And if you do happen to have a wholly unique story that's never been done before, well, good luck getting a studio to produce it, unfortunately. However, it isn't always about the story you're telling, but rather how you tell it that makes a good film. And that notion is exactly what Strange Darling showcases front and center. Serial killer movies are a dime a dozen in cinema. I mean, didn't we just get Longlegs like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago? But there is not a single serial killer movie out there quite like Strange Darling. Its individuality reminds me a lot of one of my favorite Christopher Nolan films, Memento. That film, strip it of its unique narrative structure, and it's a simple and straightforward, revenge thriller where a man is on the hunt for the people who killed his wife. Nothing we haven't seen 100 times before, right? But because of the inventive storytelling, it manages to stand out to this day still as one of the most unique films of all time, having come out, almost like 25 years ago, with nothing else having been released since then that's comparable in structure or style. The same can be said about Strange Darling, but there's a lot more than just a fresh and original script that made this movie work so well for me. Even before the true nature of the film fully revealed itself, I was already on board and thoroughly enjoying the ride. Now, the thing with one-of-a-kind movies like this one is that you really should go into them as blind as possible. I myself hadn't seen any trailers until after I watched the movie, and the only taster I had before my viewing was a couple of, promotional stills. This is all to say that if you have not seen Strange Darling yet, I highly suggest that you do so before watching any further into this video. Most of what I want to discuss cannot be done without taking a deeper dive into the various moving parts that make up this phenomenal screenplay. So go watch it, come back once you have. Don't worry, I'll be right here. You still watching? All right, cool. Let's keep going. The reveal that Willa Fitzgerald's character is the film's serial killer rather than Kyle Gallner's character may not sound like the most earth-shattering twist out there, but it's the complete package that this twist is housed in that makes a movie such a gem. Writer-director J.T. Mollner consistently entertains and subverts audience expectations in more ways than one throughout the script before we even get to that big twist. Most notably, he chops up his story into 6 chapters, plus an epilogue, and delivers these 6 chapters all out of order. This may seem like merely a stylistic choice at first, but the exact order in which these out-of-order chapters are presented to the audience is meticulously calculated and precise. Take the first hour of the movie, for example. At the end of chapter 3, which is the first chapter we see in the film, the lady arrives at the doorstep of an old couple's home. After uttering a weak and trembly, we immediately jump 2 chapters forward to chapter 5, and the demon, Kyle Gallner's character, is now inside the home, armed and ready, checking each room for any sign of the lady. We see the dead body of the man who answered the door earlier, and we can only assume that he's already been killed at the hands of the demon. Our expectations of the character up till this point on screen, combined with our past experiences with the genre itself, lead us to this conclusion, and we have zero reason to suspect that the lady has anything to do with this. Plus, now that we're aware that the story is going to be delivered to us out of order, we see the visual cue of the dead body, and we figure that some dramatic, intense set piece must have gone down here that will be shown to us later on down the road. We, as an audience, effectively double down on our certainty of the demon being this bloodthirsty, murderous presence, making the whole moment a pretty effective mislead, so that later in the film, when we finally do get to chapter 4, and we see that she's the one who kills the old man, it stands out not only in shock factor, but as an effective subversion of our preconceived notions as an audience. Had the narrative played out chronologically, we would already have the knowledge that the lady was capable of violence, based on the events of chapter 2. So her stabbing the man would have still probably been shocking in the moment, but not nearly as impactful of a sequence overall. You see why I compared this thing to Memento earlier? The actual plot of this movie is really nothing extraordinary. It is a standard, if still pretty twisted and fucked up, thriller, but the manner with which the events are presented to us shatter this conventional narrative at its core, and the ripples that this sends out makes for some truly engaging and riveting storytelling. There are several other instances like this that are sprinkled throughout the movie. Seeing how skilled the demon is with a gun and the visual cues of weapons in his car and strapped to his ankle serve to make us even more wary of this threatening presence until we find out in chapter 2, quite close to the end of the film, that he's actually a cop. Then it all makes sense. When we see the demon chasing the lady down the highway in his truck in the opening scene of the movie and he's violently ripping coke off the steering wheel, we immediately start making judgments about this guy, understandably so. But then again, towards the end of the film, those judgments are flipped upside down when we see the lady drug him with DMT. Was it? I'm pretty sure it was DMT, right? And we realize he's taking this cocaine to try and get his bearings. In a similar vein, there are a couple of moments and sequences towards the beginning of the film that showcase behaviors and mannerisms from the lady that really don't make much sense until the prior events of the narrative are revealed to us towards the end of the movie. The one at the forefront of my mind right now is at the very beginning when she's hiding in the woods and treating her head wound, and after she's done pouring alcohol over the wound, she leans back against this tree that she's sitting on and starts smoking a joint. I remember thinking, I was like, what the fuck when that happened? Because the demon was still hot on her trail at that point. I'm like, what are you doing? But when you eventually find out that she's actually the one who's more or less in control here, her lighting up a J all of a sudden doesn't seem so strange. Honestly, the lady is a pretty fascinating character to me, and I think it's quite interesting that we don't get to learn all that much about her, despite her being the main character of the film. What little we are provided about her psyche, though, is paramount to understanding her behavior throughout the course of the movie. Her monologue in chapter 1 about the extreme risks that women take when partaking in one-night stands struck me initially as a bit of darkly comedic irony, given that she was about to be on the run from the man sitting next to her, who she's telling all this to, whom we appropriately assume was a serial killer at this point in the film. Later, once the lady reveals herself, you can then revisit that monologue and realize that the insight it offers into her motivations as a killer, why she does what she does. And pair this with her line at the end of the movie, sometimes I don't see humans, I see devils, and you can then start to understand, her strange behaviors, the odd looks she gives to certain characters throughout the film, her relative comfort with violence. It also provides an explanation as to why Kyle Gauner's character is called the demon in the first place, given that he's not actually a serial killer. Another effective mislead by introducing his character as such during the opening credits, alongside the opening text that also pays homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the greats. There's so much about this script that works to elevate the storytelling here. That initial scene in the hotel room, for example, where the demon and the lady are acting out her supposed sexual fantasy, is a roller coaster of emotions, as it has you initially thinking that, oh no, this is the moment the demon is gonna reveal himself as a killer, flip the script, and then the scene ultimately gives way to the true nature of the sequence, that it's just some fantasy. It's an effective microcosm of what the script does throughout the entirety of the film, playing to our preconceived notions of gender roles and stereotypes before pulling the rug out from underneath us and flipping this entire narrative on its head. The script cleverly outsmarts the audience at every turn, and it does so by staying one step ahead of our own generalizations and expectations based on the stereotypes and culture that it dabbles in. Speaking of gender stereotypes, I've seen this film get some criticism for how it handles said roles and how it communicates its overall message. Most of this criticism comes from the ending, where a young female and older male cop arrive at the scene of the crime after the demon has already been killed and the lady is still handcuffed to the freezer. The young woman cop immediately rushes to the aid of the lady, while the older, more experienced male cop is, wary, a bit more hesitant to muddy the crime scene before backup arrives. There's some not so subtle and on the nose dialogue that the two exchange before the woman ultimately helps the lady, then swiftly meets her end. I've seen this sequence catch some fire for how it handles the overall dynamic. And look, the woman cop's line about her vagina being the reason that her male cop partner is doubting her, I agree, it's an overt and very on the nose line. But the movie up until this point hasn't shied away at all from over the top dramatic irony. Just listen to some of the dialogue between the lady and the demon in the hotel room, or go back to the scene where the old couple, aka the mountain people, are making food in their home before the lady arrives. The ending scene with the cops is, tonally, consistent with the rest of the film. And don't forget that it's another woman who comes to the lady's rescue at the end of the movie and ultimately kills her. So while I can certainly understand where the critics of this film's message are coming from, I don't really agree with the comments that the movie is simply the product of another sensitive man who felt personally attacked by the Me Too movement or anything like that. Mollner himself has made it a point to say that he wanted this film to be a narrative roller coaster and nothing else. He wasn't aiming to inject some loaded political subtext into any of it. Unfortunately, though, playing with story elements like that will ultimately spawn this kind of criticism. No form of art is immune to this. It's just an inevitable byproduct that needs to be taken in stride. I think at the end of the day, it's up to the viewer to decide if the personal offense that they take with a film or any piece of art is worth discrediting the skill and talent at play with the overall project. And results will vary between audiences. I don't want it to sound at all like I'm diminishing anyone else's opinion or takeaway here. I'm just offering my own 2 cents. I think the finale as a whole actually works to strengthen the character of the lady, showcasing her ability to read the room and use her knowledge of gender role perception to work the crisis in her own favor, despite the odds being stacked against her. How many despicable male characters in cinema have we seen do this exact same thing, using their status as a man to work a given situation in their favor? And we praise those movies all the same while also being able to recognize that we're not actually supposed to support these actions by those toxic male characters. There's definitely some exceptions. There are still people to this day that genuinely believe Walter White did nothing wrong. It all comes down to how personal experiences shape one's perspective, I suppose. But I digress. Let's wrap this thing up. Alongside the fantastic cinematography, truly phenomenal acting, and riveting music, every element of Srange Darling really is executed to its peak potential, and the result is a beautiful, well-oiled machine of a film that truly is one of the year's best offerings. I had a blast with this thing, and it gave me one of my favorite theater experiences of the year thus far. I love being outsmarted by a script. I love feeling like I'm playing catch-up with a script, and not in a bad way. It's not that I don't like being able to predict certain things. There are times I watch a movie and I'm like, oh, I can see where this is going. I like it. But I also get equal enjoyment out of just staying one step behind, and seeing what the script is going to blindside me with next. Excellent theater experience. Loved this thing. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'd love to hear what you thought of the film down in the comments. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Tell me why. Let's discuss. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, stay safe, peace out, and take care.